Here is Danny, and today it doesn't seem to be all roses and sunshine for Battlefield 6 single player campaign, and in general Battlefield 6 aka Project Glacier. Also excuses for the mixed gameplay, I don't have enough Battlefield footage on my laptop, especially for a longer video like this. But according to Ars Technica, who spoke with a bunch of developers and ex-developers from the franchise, will work on different parts of Battlefield. And according to their first-hand accounts, multiple changes around the studio have had pretty bad effect on the game. Which one of them is due to cultural changes of EA wanting the game to be massive in scope and scale, so it can compete with Call of Duty and Fortnite. This resulted in far more stress, long hours and a lot of crunch, leaving a lot of devs with burnout all along its path, which absolutely sucks. So, how did we get here? Battlefield 2042's release wasn't a success. It massively missed its internal alpha milestone targets, which meant important features of the game weren't complete, as we all remember. The game should have been delayed by another 6 months at least, but it was delayed by only a month at best. Morale fell and the game launched the way it did, badly. EA did get some goodwill back with the live service operations, but it clearly never got anywhere near its own ambition. Plans for Battlefield 6 were already underway when the game released, so DICE had to do a post-mortem to see what went wrong and where to unfuck it. They concluded that the problems had been in execution but not the vision. To achieve the vision, EA had hired 3 hotshots from the game industry: Call of Duty and Warzone's Brian Beat, Halo's Marcus Leto and Vince Zampella, while also bigger names left like Oscar Gabrielson and Lars Gustafsson, aka Mr. Battlefield. And now EA want the next Battlefield game to reach 100 million players, which Warzone got in an X amount of time, while the most successful game in the franchise, Battlefield 1, only got 30 million within that time frame. Although Battlefield 1 is a €60 premium game and did not have a free-to-play component. So the Battlefield 6 package would be a free-to-play Battle Royale and a countered mode, which I already did a video on, with paid classic multiplayer and a 6-hour campaign and portal, becoming the most expensive Battlefield game to this date due to the enormous scope. In early 2023 it already reached $400 million in expenses, caused by setbacks, disruptions and EA having to bring in more studios. The total price has ballooned. If the game fails, it wouldn't be because of the lack of scope or ambition. However, it doesn't seem like the devs believe the game can reach that 100 million number. While shooters are still very popular, it ain't 2020 or 2021 anymore, and people are back to work and school now. There's no stay-at-home mandate anymore. So yeah, about that setback I mentioned earlier. The Ridgeline implosion apparently was because the single player wasn't up to EA's standards of progress after 2 years and shuttered the studio. Now you think, well, they're slow, they deserved it. Well, it is also partly because they had to start from zero, doing a big hiring boom, and there weren't enough check-ins to see how it progressed. So if you have to hire an entire studio, you will have to spend a lot of time on that too. So starting from zero, it will take some time to actually get the studio up and running. So if you don't have the checks, you don't actually see what has been really done in those 2 years. Starting with an established studio like DICE or DICE LA versus building one from the ground up is a lot shorter, of course. Meaning Ridgeline couldn't hit the milestones that were set for the already established studios. So EA kept reallocating funds away from Ridgeline, with Criterion, DICE and Motive having to pick up the pieces. However, they couldn't just pick up from where Ridgeline left, and having to start mostly all over again, while still being within the same time constraints as the rest of the game, which does seem to be doing better. The single player is now 2 years behind, and unlike the rest, it still has not reached the alpha stage. There also seems to be some issue between DICE and the US leadership, where DICE usually prides itself in being the Battlefield guys, but they lost that now. but also a more cultural thing between the more humble Swedes and the Americans. Another issue comes from the time zones. Starting at 5 in the morning so you can have boring meetings with Americans isn't helping either, and then still having to do the rest of your shift, so the other work you are actually supposed to do. For the rest, the way EA works is they work with gates. Gate 1 is to get a proof of concept and see if it works. Gate 2 is testing the tech to see if it can actually work on scale. And Gate 3 is to full production, which Battlefield 6 was supposed to pass in early 2023. It didn't and was delayed. When it did eventually pass, questions were raised if it should have. Because the budgets apparently weren't set, there was no robust staff plan, the feature list was not complete, and risk planning and such weren't done. Those things should have been set at that point. The game apparently also went further without certain prototypes even working during the pre-production, which usually would have been the case at that moment, which means you're actively playing catch-up during the development. As the game got closer to Gate 3 and the alpha, multiple devs tried to flag that it wasn't ready yet for Gate 3. Gate 3 was eventually cleared in late May 2025, and the alpha was eventually achieved for everything but the single player. But then, multiple different things that should be ready yet aren't, leaving the door open for problems and possible compromises in the future, with developers expecting a more than normal amount of features that will be cut. While it is absolutely normal for developers to cut stuff, it might be more now, or might be coming in a future update somewhere down the line after the game released, with a pretty big day 1 patch after the game has gone gold, and the discs get pressed, which is finalized well before the game is actually out. So yeah, this doesn't seem great for the devs and the single player part of the game. Well, I feel like the multiplayer stuff will end up reasonably well. The single player campaign might not have the same fate. Maybe a thing they can do is release the multiplayer as some kind of Steam early access system, with the full 1.0 build having the single player campaign, meaning people can play and shape the game, and EA can get some return of investment back already. And that it would not be held to the same standards as the full game, with more bugs being acceptable. But you can still have those sweet microtransactions. Also apparently it is taxed differently, and that is more beneficial for EA. EA already seems to be willing to have some kind of early access with Battlefield Labs. So maybe it's possible? Do you have any hopes for the game? Let me know. Also shout out to Samuel Axon from AT, who did the interviews and wrote the base that this video is based on. And the thumbnail is by Emoden over on Twitter. But hey, that's all I got for now. Subscribe for more. This was Danny and I see you on the Battlefield.